Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our workshop again. The topic for today is the vision of planners and administrators shaped by intergovernmental aid, investment, and public-private partnership. Today, we have two distinguished presenters. First is Dr. Ratoola Kundu. Dr. Ratoola Kundu teaches at the Center for Urban Policy and Governance at the School of Habitat Studies at the Tata Institute of Social Science, India. She holds a PhD in Urban Planning and Policy from the University of Illinois, Chicago, and has worked extensively in the areas of planning and development in urban peripheries. Urban informality and contestations over space, the political economy of urban restructuring, and sustainable and accessible urban transportation. Her research, advocacy, and writing is informed by her continued engagement with grassroots groups and collectives such as National Hawkers Federation, the Home Laws Collective, and the Human Rights Law Network. And our second speakers will be presented by Dr. Malay Kumar Pramanik. Dr. Malay is an assistant professor at the Urban Innovation and Sustainability in the Faculty of Climate Change and Sustainability at Sian Institute of Technology, Thailand. Is a leading expert in urban climate solutions, sustainability, resilience, and nature-based adaptation. He holds an MPhil and PhD in integrated climate solutions from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India. He is the recipient of the Distinguished Charlie Boyden Award from the ECSA 57 in 2018, Best Presentation Award from Elsevier 2018, Early Career Scientist Award from EGU 2019, Young Scientist Fellows from the ST India, and Our Planet, Our Health Initiative Award from Wellcome Trust at the same year to 2019 for his outstanding research work. With over 14 years of international experience across Asia and the UK, his work bridges research, policy, and practice. He has supervised more than 30 graduate students, trained over 200 professionals, and led major global research projects on the Tropical Cities Initiative funded by DVAT, FCDO, and IDRC. His research interests and related research projects are green infrastructure planning for urban heat mitigation or cooling cities, blue-green infrastructure for heat and flood mitigation or greening cities, transformative solutions for transport, urban morphology, and urban canyon-induced air pollution mitigation. For example, BREAD cities. Sustainable urban developmental planning and design, including community and infrastructure resilience, plans amidst rising seas. For example, he led the project Retreat Cities, lists among the world's top 2% scientists in ecology, based on Stanford University, 2024 and 2025. Dr. Pramanik has published over 80 peer-reviewed articles and developed 20 academic courses. In 2025, he jointly received AIT's Distinguished Research Award as an assistant professor category. As a chair of Urban Innovation and Sustainability at AIT, he continues to advance impactful solutions across the region. So, as always, we always have a very excellent and distinguished speaker. And for the first session, we will be listening the lecture from Dr. Ratoola Kundu. So, Dr. Ratoola Kundu, over to you.
Thank you to the Calcutta Research Group and CIFR. I'm very happy to be here to discuss one of my research areas, which has been about looking at the redevelopment of a neighborhood in Mumbai called Kamatipura, which is also known as one of the red light districts, one of quite well-known red light district of Asia, actually, one of the largest. So yes, just to share that this lecture is going to be about how this particular neighborhood, which is within the city of Mumbai, has been faced with a series of redevelopment plans, but none of these plans have actually come to full realization. But in spite of that, what we do see is that the neighborhood has undergone a series of socio-spatial transformations, and these socio-spatial transformations have been targeted at the most vulnerable sections of this particular neighborhood, and has led to their displacement, their dispossession, and also their stigmatization through these rounds of proposed plans. So, really, to kind of think along, how do we look at future making, because we are talking about how do we envision the city's future. So the question is, what kind of future is being envisioned for the city? Who is actually doing this envisioning process? And as a result of that, who is part of this, reimagined future of the city, and who is not? So who loses out and who benefits from this re-envisioning exercise? Okay, so just to take you a bit into the heart of my area, so this is more like a pastiche of images drawn from the field of Kamatipura. It's a very tiny neighborhood. It's right in the bang in the middle of the city, very close to Grant Road, the station, one of the main station areas. And it has a history that goes back to almost 250 years, when the Kamatis, who are a group from Andhra, who came to Mumbai to carry out construction work to make the city under the British rule, right? So these were construction workers, but they had no place to live in the colonial administrators' fortified city. So they located to right outside the fortified city in a marshy area where there were tenements set up for these kind of migrant workers, and this became known as one of these areas became known as Kamatipura, where the Kamatis settled. And eventually, they started to bring in their families, etc., to start and make a life in this really harsh kind of area where there was not much services in terms of water or sanitation, etc., just the buildings that housed them and the road network that led to these buildings. Interestingly, 200 years back, around the same time, the colonial powers decided that, sex work, commercial sex work, could not be allowed within the fortified walls of the city of Mumbai. And so, but yet, commercial sex workers needed to still continue to operate, and they were therefore moved into this particular neighborhood, much against the wishes of the Kamatis. But, they sort of carved out a kind of unique existence together. So there was the Kamatis, there were the commercial sex workers, including European white sex workers who lived and worked in this particular neighborhood. So over time, and even after the independence, this area within the city of Mumbai became kind of notorious, became kind of known as the red light district, as more and more prostitutes started living and working here. And it was kind of okay to live and work here as long as you did not disrupt or get into the affairs of the existing dwellers or the inhabitants who were the Kamatis in this area. By this time, the Kamatis had become blue-collar workers. They were working also in the textile mills. They were also working in various other occupations in the city. So there was a kind of an acknowledgement that, there were these two groups, roughly there, the sex workers and the clientele that came in every night, or even sometimes during the day. But, these areas where there was kind of an invisible boundary between the residents and the sex workers at that point of time. However, from the 1960s, there has been a series of redevelopment plans for Kamatipura, this particular area. As you see, the buildings are extremely old because they were built 200 to 50 years back. And there's also the issue of the the Rent Control Act being in place since the 1940s, which kept the rent at that particular level. And so people, the tenants in these buildings, paid a very nominal amount to actually live there, which made these areas actually very, very affordable for the urban poor working class, right? But what it also meant was there was no repair that was done for these buildings, and these buildings kind of became super dilapidated and almost, beyond repair, because the landlords refused to repair the conditions of these particular buildings. So around the 1960s, the urban local body of the municipality actually wanted to redevelop Kamatipura, and they approached the World Bank to help them to rethink this. How do we sort of redevelop this area? How do we kind of bring these really old, dilapidated buildings down? How do we bring in water, sanitation, and infrastructure into these areas, right? So from there, from the 1960s, the government and various other stakeholders have been thinking about how to improve the conditions of Kamatipura, right? Right up to now, and I'll get into the discussions now, where we see the entry of the private real estate developers. We have the Kamatipura Landlords Association. We have the Tenants Association from Kamatipura, along with the Maharashtra government, who are all involved in the process of revisioning what is going to be the future of Kamatipura, right? So it still hasn't gone ahead. I mean, it hasn't been totally brought down or bulldozed, even though the buildings are falling down in many places, and that there are new towers coming up in certain plots, as you can see. But it is a pastiche. It is very much still a working class dominated neighborhood at this moment, where there's also active commercial sex work happening on the ground even to this day. So what explains the fact that this area has not been completely bulldozed, in spite of the efforts of real estate developers, in spite of the efforts of the state, in spite of the efforts of the landlords? So what is the reason behind the actual this kind of enduring quality of this particular neighborhood right in the heart of Kamatipura? So before I go into that, I'd just like to say that, when we think about futures of cities, there's a long history to that envisioning of cities' future. This here is Lee Corbusier's very famous kind of idea of, towers in the park, and how he had thought about, bulldozing Paris, for instance, and building this kind of modern, what he considered as modern kind of residential areas inside the park, connected to super highways. But his idea of this kind of really, this kind of a high modernist kind of planning, this kind of utopian vision of cities that are excellently organized. There's kind of a grid iron kind of pattern to how road networks will be laid out. There will be a separation and segregation of land uses, whether, so housing and residential uses have to be very separate, kept separate from any kind of commercial uses, etc. Industrial uses go into another place. So, this kind of a high modernist planning has been there since the modernist era, right? Since the 1940s, even before that. And this kind of a top-down thinking was very authoritarian, and it was a kind of a scientific and technological belief that there could be a scientific and technological transformation of built environment, which would then go on to engineer social change, right? And this kind of utopianism was also a political act of signaling to a better tomorrow, but a better tomorrow which was also rooted and in the kind of understanding of what was actually wrong with the present day scenario. So for the modernist thinkers like Lee Corbusier, the urban utopias, where they were very, very, the utopian imagination was actually, they believed in the ideal of a city. Yes, they did. But what they did also not like was the fact that industrial cities were spewing pollution, had become extremely congested, and therefore hazardous for living conditions, right? But this kind of high kind of modernist thinking. It was very top down and utopian. And some of this still continues today. So just coming back to, to understanding, where does Kamatipura, how does Kamatipura look today? What's really happening today? And, who is living there and who is working there today? So these are some very current images I took late last year. And as you can see, there are some buildings which kind of look new, but then there are also older buildings over there which are absolutely falling apart, and they're almost held together by these bamboo structures, etc. It's almost as if Kamatipura today, there are about 700 buildings in this 52-acre neighborhood, and out of these 700 buildings, almost 80% of them come under the Rent Control Act. So they are pretty old. They're around more than 100 and 150 years old. They're in really dilapidated shape, which means, they're under the Maharashtra government's repair and reconstruction board 2B. And the idea is that they should be demolished and they should be redeveloped. That's the idea behind, but people still continue to hold on to these spaces, and they're living there and they're working there. And one might ask, but why doesn't it look so dangerous? The fear amongst people in Kamatipura is that they don't want to be displaced from Kamatipura, which is very centrally located in the heart of the city. And they have been living here for generations, right? They have families here, they have their religious spaces here, they have their markets here, they have their social networks over here. And so they're very skeptical of any plan that is going to, situate them somewhere else for the time being, or bring them back here, or, they're just afraid of some of the kind of development agendas that's ongoing at the moment. Some of them are simply scared that they will not be allowed to come back because they will not be able to prove their eligibility as tenants in this particular neighborhood, right? So those are some of the contestations that you see on the ground, which prevents people from actually leaving such dangerously dilapidated quarters even now, right? And there are some others. The idea behind Kamatipura is that, the popular perception in Mumbai is that although it's in the heart of the city, it's kind of an area where middle class, respectable people are supposed to avoid. And that's because of the historical perception behind Kamatipura as a red light area. But it is not just a red light area. Of course, there are brothels that are there. There are commercial sex workers who still operate there. But there are the construction workers who are now also mill workers, small-time factory workers. There are people who make small beedis or cigarettes. There are cloth sellers. There are people who are dyeing jeans in some of these lanes. There are recyclers of electronic equipments. There are people who are making bags and shoes. There are small retail shops. There are small repair shops. So all in all, this particular neighborhood within the city of Mumbai is a very buzzing and diverse neighborhood made up really of the urban poor working class. And it is, and part of the reason, the resistance to any kind of large-scale top-down redevelopment plan is that those redevelopment plans will not address the livelihood concerns of the people who continue to live in Kamatipura, right? Definitely of the sex workers, but of all these other categories of informal kind of work that you find happening in the buildings, in the streets of Kamatipura to this day, right? One of the arguments that I also make in this paper is how Kamatipura has come to be this kind of a extremely dilapidated, degraded, deprived neighborhood. Right? As you can see, there's trash piled up there, old doors or windows. The buildings are in very poor shape, except a few towers that are brand new that you can see coming up from the background. One of the arguments that my co-author Shivani and I make is that this is very much structural violence, in the sense that this is a slow kind and a very deliberate neglect of a particular neighborhood and its housing concerns. Of the population who has been treated and stigmatized by the larger city population and by the city government, right? So, because this area has been known as has been criminalized as a space where sex work still continues to happen, that there are underhand other kinds of criminal activities that are going on there, that this is a poor, that this is a place inhabited by mostly poor people, and they cannot afford the costs of actually improvement in infrastructure. So for the longest time, although there's a mandate by the Maharashtra Repair and Reconstruction Board to actually do small scale repairs whenever possible, this has actually not happened in these buildings, which are also under the Rent Control Act under the government of Maharashtra. And this kind of deliberate neglect is what has led to the unraveling of the space and the physical disrepair and destruction of this space. It's almost as if we're waiting for the time when people will no longer be able to inhabit these spaces because it will be so dangerous that houses will collapse. And every monsoon, houses do collapse in Kamatipura, killing at least 5 to 7 to 8 to 9 people. And this is structural violence. You don't see it. It's not physical in that sense, like physical violence. It is not even episodic violence. It's not conflict or clash of some sort, but it is structured in the way in which the state sees this as a place where we don't want to place any bets right now. We will just let it to its own kind of slow death. Let it die on its own, decay on its own. Let the people leave on their own, and then we can come in and develop this area. Why am I saying we can come in and develop this area? This particular space, the Kamatipura neighborhood, is within the heart of the city of Mumbai. So all around it, there's redevelopment going on, and the real estate price has skyrocketed in this particular era, right? And real estate developers are kind of all struggling to sort of get inside this area and transform this area into these kind of high-rise tower development spaces. But it hasn't happened so far. Now the question is, why not? So to move on, can you see my slide? So this is the latest sort of photo of the brochure of the real estate developers and how they've reimagined the space that I showed you right now, which is in the heart of Kamatipura neighborhood, into this kind of reimagined space with, as you can see, it's a top view of these kind of towers set in a really nice, beautiful kind of green space. And there will be these massive towers that are going up. And then there is this central point where they're kind of reimagining also a statue dedicated to the workers or the kamatis, which is in the shape of a fist. And so this kind of reimagination, where is it really coming from? What is really going to happen with regard to this particular reimagination? Now, this is a plan that has been floated by the Kamatipura Landlords Welfare Association. So it is a pool of the 500 or so landlords of the buildings within Kamatipura who have come together, and they have floated this reimagination of Kamatipura as a set of these huge 40 plus stories towers where the current population will live, and also some floors of these towers will be sold in the open market at a profit, so that there will be new people also coming into this particular neighborhood to live once it is sanitized and redrawn and redeveloped into this particular imagery, right? But what is really involved in this, right? And what kinds of aesthetics or logics or what I call moral regimes in this paper has been driving this particular kind of urban vision, right? So in the 90s, actually, where you have seen a significant transformation in the way in which even Mumbai as a whole is being reimagined as, as Shanghai, for instance. Mumbai will be made into Shanghai. The market is being opened up to foreign direct investment in real estate. Private developers are being welcomed. The master plans or development control regulations are being severely diluted so that developers find it profitable to actually come into these neighborhoods and do redevelopment projects on behalf of the state, because the state has quietly said that we do not have the finances to actually foot the bill for this kind of redevelopment project. So we would like a partnership with real estate developers in order to sort of redevelop these large scale kind of redevelopment projects. But behind this is also a kind of social spatial transformation within Kamatipura at this moment, where you see the long-term residents of Kamatipura suddenly sort of identifying commercial sex workers as problematic, as standing in the way of this particular redevelopment process, because they feel that the fact that Kamatipura is associated with commercial sex work, and that it is in people's perception that the neighborhood is filled with the commercial sex workers, and that it is a red light area, that it is stigmatized. Nobody will be willing to actually put their money into development in this area. So from the 90s, you have landlords as well as residents who have worked together in association, come together on various fronts to actually remove sex workers, shut down brothels within the space of Kamatipura. Right. There were, and also, as you know, 1990s has also been the period where there was a lot of moral panic and public health panic around AIDS. And therefore, this particular neighborhood and the landlords who had leased out their buildings to brothels, to the operation of sex work, were suddenly very scared of the specter of AIDS. And so that also, in conjunction with the pressures from the private real estate market, was pushing out the sex workers from this neighborhood. So although the projects were not coming through, the pressure was internal, right? The pressure was internal from the other residents of Kamatipura, who saw that the road block to the redevelopment process were the sex workers, and then they wanted them out of their neighborhood so that the redevelopment process could go ahead. But in spite of this, there have been other kinds of roadblocks, even when private developers have been given a lot of leeway in terms of, how much FSI or how much can they build, in terms of like how tall their buildings can be, how much profit can they make, what kind of saleable components can they have, what kind of setbacks they need to put. All these kind of planning regimes and controls have been loosened by the state in order to allow them to play, to kind of redevelop this neighborhood. But it still hasn't gone forward because there have been other kinds of resistances to the idea of redeveloping Kamatipura. And that has come from the tenants in these buildings, also the long-term tenants in these buildings who have, who say that they want a bigger space, that they have lived here for 3 to 4 generations, and they're not happy with the kind of spaces that the developers, the private developers, are going to give them. So some of the pushback has actually come from the tenants who now see this particular in terms of a commodification of the space that they live in, not necessarily in terms of the community and the social network that they have lived in for generations, but in terms of now how they see the space that they live in, that they occupy, as a commodity in the market that can be traded against certain benefits, right? So just to sort of, give you a sort of an understanding of the various stakeholders and project status across different eras. So in the 60s, like I told you, Kamatipura was labeled as a slum, and the World Bank said, yes, we can do a slum improvement project. But the residents actually opposed being classified as a slum because they said that we are not a slum, we are not illegal, we are legal residents here, we pay our tenants, we are legal tenants, and we can prove that. So there was only a partial sort of redevelopment of certain buildings in the 1960s, and the World Bank therefore stepped back because they couldn't sort of see this as a way to sort of upscale that project. In the 80s, very interestingly, MADA, which is the government housing and Area Development Authority of the government of Maharashtra, actually came up with a redevelopment plan for the entire area of Kamatipura, this entire neighborhood of 500 to 700 houses, including the areas which housed the sex workers, right? And this included the rehabilitation of shops, small shops and shopkeepers, as well as sex workers within this particular neighborhood. Unfortunately, this plan never had any financial backing, and therefore, though it was a very well worked out plan proposal, it never got a green signal because there were nobody was willing to put finances into a large scale and complicated development process in this area like this, right? There were too many factors going on. In the early 2000s, we see the entry of a private developer who was able to buy out a particular portion of Kamatipura from the landlords and did a partial redevelopment of these buildings. However, the rest of his plan for the neighborhood was stalled because the real estate market crashed, and there was no more market incentive to go on with the rest of the project for the neighborhood, right? But what it did in effect was people in Kamatipura started to realize that the potential, the actual profit potential that could be leveraged if their houses went into redevelopment, and the fact that sex workers living in these areas was therefore seen as one of the impediments to this kind of redevelopment process. 2015 onwards, we have the formation of the Landlords Association. They come together again. They very much see their property as a commodity. They force the government to dilute the development control regulations. They ask for the introduction of a cluster redevelopment model, it will not be independent houses going for redevelopment, but the entire area to be redeveloped as a whole, because the people living here now want space to keep their cars. They want their own modern toilets. They want plumbing. They want their own water connections. They want their own kitchens, and they want better building quality. All of this is coming together, right? However, this kind of process is a long drawn out process. It goes back and forth between the private developers, between the landlords association, between the tenants who constantly fight back the landlords, and then also the state government, which is also trying to kind of now come in as a facilitator amongst all these different stakeholders who are finding that that there is a huge profit to be gained if we can do this at a cluster level, as a neighborhood level, rather than small scale development projects at the building level, right? In recent years, last year, the government of Maharashtra has approved of a plan for cluster redevelopment for the entire area, except for one small cluster in the corner, which is where the brothels still are, where the commercial sex worker is. So out of the original 52 acres, 39 acres has been taken up under this cluster redevelopment model, and but there is no mention of what is going to happen for small shopkeepers, for the recyclers who work there, for several tenants who may not have eligible claims to their houses, and of course there is almost zero mention of what will happen to the sex workers. But yet this plan has been discussed, and it has gone through various levels of the government of Maharashtra, and they have greenlit the project and identified a developer as well. What is happening on the ground? And if you can see on the ground, this picture is, from what we spoke to people over there. It is these various small shopkeepers, the commercial sex workers, who claim Kamatipura as their own, right? And they say very much that this is also our Kamatipura. This is our neighborhood. Where else can we go? Because this is a neighborhood that has historically acknowledged their presence in whatever problematic and complex way, but has allowed them to live in this and work in this area. And they have built up certain social networks and social stakes within this neighborhood over time. Their children go to schools here, they have family members here, etc. So over time, and for these commercial sex workers, for them, the outside of Kamatipura seems particularly harsh, where they know that their bodies and their work will be placed under surveillance, and they will not be able to practice what they do. But yet, on the other hand, they feel that they do belong to this neighborhood, and that they are being constantly erased from the history of Kamatipura in the kind of reimagination that's happening for the future of Kamatipura. So the future where Kamatipura is reimagined as this cluster of new networks of towers where only the Kamatis will live. The ones who are legible to stake claim are those who were the workers or the migrant workers, but not the small shopkeepers, not the sex workers, and not the other kinds of tenants who have lived and worked in Kamatipura. So just to kind of wrap up, and my concluding sort of comments is that urban redevelopment plans, so this is just one urban redevelopment plan. Right now, Mumbai is a series of redevelopment plans across various neighborhoods and various scales and various stages of phases of redevelopment that's going on, from the very building level to a neighborhood level. But what these urban redevelopment plans show, that when you read into these plans, that they are top down. They are also very exclusionary in the kinds of clauses that they have as to, what kind of development can happen, who can be the developers as well, what should be the stature of a private developer who wants to come in and partner with the government as, as a large scale private developer in this kind of a complex development project. Right. But these kind of projects are also being constantly contested from various quarters, right? Either it is the tenants or it is sex workers who refuse to leave from Kamatipura. Though they're being told by the landlords to leave, they refuse to leave, even if they have left the brothels, but they still continue to come back here and solicit customers from the space of Kamatipura. So they're very much there on the streets of Kamatipura even now, almost like a badge of resistance, saying we reclaim the streets for ourselves. This is where we have always worked historically, and this is where we will continue to work in this space, right? Although it's a very hostile environment within which they are now working. The plans which are not realized. So I've shown you a series of, 50 to 70 years of plan making, which have not really been realized. They've been partially realized. They've been put in the back burner. One or two towers have come up, but not really at a large scale. Even though they have not been realized, they have led to a change in perception. They have led to a change in aspiration amongst people who live there. And these have led to a pushback and exclusion and displacement of the very vulnerable sections within Kamatipura. So whether these are recyclers, whether these are the commercial sex workers, they have been displaced by, even unrealized plans, because the residents themselves have seen that, if we push them out, perhaps, possibly the government will pay us more attention, or the private developers will find it more profitable to invest in this particular place, right? So the residents have gotten together to sort of push out unwanted elements from the neighborhood, right? What they consider as unwanted neighborhoods. Kamatipura has also been systematically neglected and marginalized, left to disrepair and dilapidation, which has proved to be fatal. And this is what we call structural violence in the city, where this kind of long-term, slow disrepair, it's almost like a regime of disrepair that has gone on, which has now proved to be fatal, because people are dying in these buildings which are simply falling apart because the government does not believe in repair, in the culture of repair, but would much rather place its money and its bet in redevelopment, which brings in more money, right? Which opens up the possibility of selling the space and commodifying the space in terms of private property, right? We see various configurations of state, market, and people driving these redevelopment agendas, and these have changed over time. And where we see that in certain moments of these configurations, for instance, tenants have been able to resist and bargain for, say, larger apartment size. Does this equate to housing justice? Not necessarily. But it is, in a certain way, a bargaining chip where tenants have been able to sort of push back against their own landlords and against the market and the state, saying, we've been staying here for very long, we belong to this area, we make what is the community of Kamatipura, and therefore we need larger spaces. We need larger spaces, and you have to give us these larger, when you come up with these towers, we want bigger units over here. But this has obviously come at the cost of erasures and displacements of several other groups of vulnerable inhabitants and workers. And of course, all of this is underlying, all of this is the deregulation of the state and the state's instruments, whether it's the master plan, the development plan, the dilution of its development control rules and regulations, always in favor of private developers who want more and more profit. So they scale down on issues of safety. They take over public amenities. They remove public amenities and put on private spaces. They kind of erase the history of this kind of really complicated, complex history of Kamatipura, and try and put in a new history and create a new history of Kamatipura and sanitize its very roots and beginnings, and to try and create a new order or a new re-envisioning of what Kamatipura in the future will be. So with that, I will end my talk. Thank you. So open to questions.
Much, Dr. Ratoola Kundu. It was very insightful lecture. So I think a lot of people want to know more about your research. So we open the floor for the participants. But unfortunately, as we have only limited time, so maybe 2 to 3 questions, it's enough. Yeah. So we can start from Mr. Emilio. You can start to ask the question to our presenter.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you a lot for your for this lecture. It was amazing, very very interesting. It left me thinking on a lot of things. I used to work. I used to do research on a waste picker neighborhood here in Mexico City, and of course the big problem always was the issue of home-based work with hazardous materials, no, and how to improve the housing for people to be able to keep on having their livelihoods, no. But okay, what I wanted to ask you has to do with the cultural aspect of these redevelopment plans, no. Like we usually think about them in economic terms, but we don't think about the tastes of what people want to consume are deeply cultural, no? And I was thinking, I had the question that to what extent have the tastes of newer generations of consumers changed in a way that they are not looking for sanitized and sterile places anymore, but maybe they can integrate other models of dwelling. And I was even thinking to what extent people also want to consume culture, no? Especially people who rent, or digital nomads, these kinds of people. Many of them, they want to go to a place to experience the history of a place and experience the original dwellers of a place, no? So I was thinking maybe this can actually change the way urban redevelopment is thought, no? Depending on who are the consumers that we're talking about. And yeah, I just wanted to ask that. And if in Mumbai, you know of any case of redevelopment that is not so sanitizing and that is more hybrid, that tries to integrate the previous social and economic tissue of a place into the redevelopment.
Thank you, Emilio. Very thoughtful question. And I would say that with respect to the Kamatipura's redevelopment, it is a cultural project, very much. But the cultural, I think the dominant narrative that is driving the cultural politics of redevelopment in Kamatipura is by the Kamatipura, the Kamati Landlords Association. Simply because they have more power and they're the elite over there. And so, for instance, they also have a 200-year-old history in the city as migrants, right? So what they have been able to insist on in the current reimagination of this new Kamatipura is that the history of their of their emergence as workers in the city will be very much recognized. So in the central plaza of the redeveloped, of the plans, the proposal for the redevelopment is actually a monument for the workers, right? The construction workers, specifically the Kamati construction workers. But that means that it does not pay equal weightage to the others who have also been part of Kamatipura's history. And here I'm talking about the commercial sex workers, right? So in that reimagining, yes, a particular group has been able to bring forward its cultural politics and enforce that cultural politics on this space, while it is erasing the other kind of histories of this place as well, right? And it's coming from ground up. It's not, the developer's imagination. The developer is responding to what the landlords are actually asking them to do. That being one. And two, the fact that there is possibly no hybrid imagination at this moment I cannot think of a single project, Emilio. Sorry to disappoint you, where there is more concern or there is more thought being given to a more sort of inclusive kind of redevelopment agenda. Unfortunately, it's also to do with the real estate market and the prices that even a square inch of space commands in the open market, right? So any space that is given over to, unwanted kind of, or even say public, just to say, even public spaces are going into the hands of private developers, whether it's, say, open spaces, for instance, in Mumbai, are being converted to yes, green spaces, but these are green spaces at a level in the building. So which means that people within a particular building will be able to enjoy them, not the public as such. There are spaces such as, parking spaces which are taking over parks in the city. So there is this huge, I think, tussle at the moment where private developers are claiming more and more of what constitutes public space. And unfortunately, the redevelopment regime is reducing a lot of what we call as public space in the city, including, also housing of the poor. And that has led to, a whole kind of, at the level of the city, if you read some of my colleagues' works, you will see that there is a distinct peripheralization of the poor that's happening right now, where they're just being moved into the edges. And sorry, I'm taking really long to respond, but it's a very good question. But I wanted to give a little bit more depth into what you were asking. I see there's also a question
Thank you.
in the chat box. Emilio, please write to me. I'd love to have a longer discussion with you at some point over the phone or something. And there's a question in the chat box about sex workers in Kamatipura. Yes, there is also violence, the everyday violence against sex workers. There are children who are trafficked into this space. So I am definitely not, let's say, romanticizing sex workers or the kind of work they do. But I firmly believe that within the sex workers community, from what I've understood and engaged with them, that there is a significant group over there that is there because of reasons of poverty, but they have come there out of their, let's say, because they don't have other opportunities, and they have come here, not because they've been trafficked here, they have come here to practice sex work, and that they would like to be considered as workers and not necessarily, seen as kind of criminals. And at the moment, the law in India is very kind of gray, where, basically these women, sex work per se is not illegal, but if you own or operate a brothel, or if you're a pimp, you can be charged under, other kinds of offenses. But the reason why prostitutes and sex workers get picked up from the streets is because they are considered as public nuisance. So it's under a very kind of archaic police law under which they're picked up. And then there is, of course, a lot of harassment from police, including harassment from NGO workers in trying to prove their identities. They do not, and part of the reason why they don't fit into the redevelopment discourse is because they do not have any rights to the space, to these brothels, because there is no identity paper. There is no paper where they put an address, and the address as claiming this space, this brothel space or this room within Kamatipura as the space as tenants, right? So they have practically no say, right, within this whole thing, right? But they're very visible and they form a very historical entity of this place nonetheless, right? So that's the answer. Shahriar?
So I think Mr. Sakra will be our last question, last participant to ask, because I'm so sorry because we don't have that much time, which is like it's too bad for both of us. So okay, so you can go on to Mr. Saryarhak. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong. So you can go ahead.
So much, everyone, and I'm welcome to take questions online.
I was kind of interested because my second job after graduation, I worked for BNWLA, Bangladesh National Women Lawyers Association. And our job, I was a program coordinator, was to rescue underage girls, from different places in Dhaka or Bangladesh. And a lot of them were also trafficked to India. So anyway, we also have a town like that called Dolodia. It's the biggest, you can say, legalized brothel in Bangladesh and one of the biggest in the world as well. And so I was thinking of that as I was listening to you. So my question is, how are developers trying to commercialize the housing project in the open market, given that Kamatis and Kamatipura has a different identity? Because that's the question.
Yes, so I think one of the ways is simply to the built form, right? The built form is a complete bulldozing of what exists right now. So that's the whole neighborhood will be bulldozed, and the entire neighborhood will be reimagined as this kind of what you see in Bombay otherwise, the very much the Shanghai kind of towers and all of that what is going to replace the current what is the current framework of Kamatipura. Other than that, they have been paying off the landlords to remove the brothels and the sex workers. And they have been also paying and supporting residents' welfare associations and shopkeepers associations in Kamatipura to work against the sex workers. So they're actually vigilante groups within, I didn't have time to talk about this, but there are vigilante groups operating within Kamatipura funded by the developers who are sort of slowly weaning out, the spaces of living in Kamatipura for sex workers. So the brothels have almost reduced from what used to be 400 brothels in, say, 1950s. There is some account. To 1990s, it came down to 100. And now there is about a 40 or 50 odd brothels that's operating. And that's because of the payment that landlords have gotten to say, just get rid of them. Don't allow them to live in your buildings. We don't care where they go. Or threat and violence against sex workers when they're operating on the streets. So violence is very much every day, as it is structural also in Kamatipura.
But can you actually bulldoze the identity and the past, even though you're bulldozing the physical structure?
I think that's, I got a very interesting quote from one of the developers, who was a bit skeptical. Well, he's a developer within Mumbai, and he talked about this, and he said, I might build there, but will you come and live there? I said, you're talking to a wrong demographic. I'd love to, because as a professor, I don't have the money to buy anywhere in Mumbai right now. But if you're saying you'll reduce the prices over here and it's in the middle of the city, I'd love to buy it, an apartment here. No questions asked. So yes, they will. A lot of Mumbai is driven by speculation. So they don't even worry that, that people will not live there. As long as speculation happens, it's fine. So basically, it's an emptying out of the space. And that's what's happening. It's the money that's driving it. And even the existing Kamatis may not want to live here. They will simply sell off their apartments and go somewhere else, because these apartments are going to be close to 5-10 crores of rupees. So it's huge. Just the money amount is huge. So I think that's what's changing the game so swiftly for that.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Ratoola Kundu, thank you so much for your lecture this evening. It was very insightful, and I'm sure a lot of participants still wants to ask you more about your research, about your lecture, about your expertise, but we don't have much time. Yeah. So Madhubanti already give your email address in the chat box, so everyone can ask her and reach on her email. So thank you so much, Dr. Ratoola Kundu, and have a good night. Good evening. Okay, we will continue our second session, which will be a lecture by Dr. Malay. Maybe we can go ahead and offer to you, Dr. Malay. Thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sifa, and thank you, everyone. Okay, all right. Okay, so this is Who's for Urban Futures. Mostly at that section, we'll be discussing on planning, aid, and also some of the city concepts like contested cities and also ordinary cities. So let us have those discussion and how those landscapes are changing with international aid, different planning, and also we are making our cities contesting. Okay. So this presentation will be discussing on mostly, definitely will be focusing on South and South Asian context, how that's shaping by aid, finances, and then different partnerships with mostly private and public partnerships. And then we'll be discussing some of the planning dimensions and how it's actually reflecting different institutional power, then some of the priorities, and then political choice actually making urban futures. So those topics will be into those discussions. And then we'll be discussing some of the climate finance and governance system, how it's shaping different city selective developments outcomes, and then how we are moving into our urban futures. So those are the topic. So please feel free to interrupt me during my discussion as well to debate and discussion on those topic to broaden our mind into that maybe urban economy, urban political economy, economical insights. Okay, let me move to some of the backgrounds. So definitely, we know most of the city by their, popular kind of infrastructure projects. And then, sometime that kind of, development we actually visualize through their, skylines, metro systems, and then some of the emerging issues, how we are adapting through different, high costly infrastructures like coastal defenses. And in now global, such a kind of situation, we can understand how those kind of, smart command also acting in our, city related futures. So definitely, that kind of visible transformation we'll be discussing on, and then urban evaluation definitely. Although we should have think about that, creeping natural urban evolution, but they're actually not having into dimensions. So they're mostly on, we can say, by shortly institutional products. Okay. So there are one picture. Can anybody see it and mark it? Where is that place? I can't see anybody's face. So please feel free to anyone responding those pictures. Do we know that place? Where is this place?
Can anyone identify the place?
No? Okay, all right. So whatever that command, institutional product, that actually within institutions, that actually not tangible to us. Okay, let me give you name. I hope all of you know our CFA coordinator, and she actually from that place. This is a giant seawall national capital integrated coastal development plans funded by World Bank and also ADB through some of the Netherlands institutes, technical guidance and involvements. Okay, let us see that kind of plans and visions. Okay. So there are multiple concerns, particularly ecological distribution. Then there are a lot of displacement with fishing communities. Then huge governance issues. A lot of concerns even related to overfunding, and then concerns related to implementation transparency, and also long-term sustainable maintenance. Okay. But still those projects are actually shaping urban futures, but we really do not know how those are by creepingly impacting us. Okay, and then what I said, that actually coming with sovereign loan agreements, and also different multilateral safeguard policies, and then PPP partnerships and concessions, and then very long term financial instruments. Okay, and those instruments we are having, but still we do not know that how our city is actually shaping through those investments. Okay, let us move to next examples. I hope you can find it. Can you find that picture?
Is
Anybody?
it Bangkok? It's like Bangkok.
Bangkok MRT.
Yeah, Bangkok. It's like
That's
Bangkok.
great. Okay, that's good. This is also one example of PPP concessions. Okay, can you see that example? Another picture. Where is that place from map?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, it's Bangkok, right? Already written.
Yeah.
That's a very huge investments, billions of green infrastructure investment, particularly flood resilient cities by World Bank. And although there are a lot of concerns, but still near road to net zero to Thailand green action plans. Okay, and that actually shaping different kind of management reform, then flood mitigation strategies. That flood management reform actually not reforming flood management within Bangkok, that actually reforming whole water management reform. Okay, let me give you more examples. Okay, that also you can say that aid driven urban futures. That picture already mentioned that Ho Chi Minh City metro line, which is actually financed through different loans and particularly JICA. And then there are some bilateral agreement as well with Vietnam, Japan, even including ODA agreements. Okay, and those agreements definitely not for small term. Those are very huge kind of long term scenarios and engagements. Okay, so that's also another example. How many of you from India? Anybody?
There are a few from India, not too many. But
Okay, all right. Okay, so can you see that right picture? This is New Delhi city center plan. Hugely ignoring urban poor, and mostly you can say this is a kind of elite areas plan. Okay, and even not only that's a kind of I can see representative from all smart city plans, although that's implementing by PPP model, and also collaboration with multiple global partners from Japan, France, Germany, Singapore, even also multiple projects, multiple implementations. But one message is that in every implementations actually ignoring urban pores. Okay, so then how we are making our inclusive city plans? Okay, let me move. So what we understand, generally there are a few concerns that whenever those kind of city driven kind of initiatives are coming through different funds initiative, and that governance actually operating transnationally, even somehow some authority even not controlling through national agencies, somehow it's going beyond borders. Okay, and then some regulatory networks, financial mechanisms, totally changing, you can say transnationally. Okay. And definitely, international aid actually, even playing major role into those financial restructuring, even also governance restructuring and many things. Okay, so definitely, ADB funding, although shaping a lot of developments in India, but still, in terms of climate adaptation, in terms of developmental, transport corridor project, there are different strategies and, those kind of aid actually defining priorities. Okay, what are those priorities? If you know recently, you can find out climate resilience. Okay, then we developed, 1.5 decade ago, smart city. We are not, accurately moving into appropriate path, but still we are thinking about digital governance. Okay, and then we are thinking how we can do infrastructural modernization, even that kind of priority actually setting by different government funding agencies. And then not only that, even we know we are living with 55 degrees centigrade, but still, although there are few adaptation plans and few organizations taking lead on, do research and in report, and then, capacity building, training, but still, those kind of plan also related with housing upgradations. But remain those kind of strategy, housing adaptations, housing upgradations, then linked with informal heat adaptations, remain marginal. Okay, so that's ad driven strategy actually not giving you a chance to think about how you can do inclusive and how you can not to move into marginal, other than you should be thinking about better sustainable ways. Okay, let me give you a few more examples. Here you can see how that translational climate governance also working. Okay, and somehow that increasing operating different scales, different levels, even you can say vertical structures, and then somehow even influencing urban climate policy decisions. Okay, and then somehow we can understand those hybrid PPP initiatives are even expanding different climate governance actions. Okay, and those actually shaping by funding and investment instruments definitely, but in some of the investment, whenever we are calling adaptation planning, adaptation kind of structure in terms of political, social, socio-political economics, but still in the name of adaptation, we are actually doing a lot of developmental project and shaping our cities in different dimensions. Okay, and there are multiple news, not many article you can find. Accountability mechanism also very fragmented, even across the scale, across the vertical scales. Okay, so you can see some of the developmental project, coastal adaptations. We do not know how much successful those adaptation plans and initiatives, very local, or maybe we are thinking about how we can make it more popularize through branding, through more investments. But finally, we do not know how that scale up actually implementing in inclusive solutions. Okay. Okay, let me move some of the examples. Can you see that picture? I hope
Yes,
Sifa can
Professor.
respond. Sifa,
Yes.
this is from.
I pretty sure this is from Jakarta because
Okay, great.
the motorbike number is B, so it's of Jakarta.
Okay, great. You do not know place, adaptation plan, aid, finances, investments, huge. But still, we do not know place other than motorcycle name or that kind of words. Okay, anyway, that's from Jakarta. There, that's a huge coastal adaptation plans with hard infrastructure. But definitely global research already done how soft engineering solutions more sustainable than hard, but still you can see huge investment with hard infrastructure plans. Okay, then again you can see flood protection plans in Bangkok. Okay, so we do not know, if Thailand, similar kind of flood impact happened like 2011, how that kind of solutions will be for the community. Okay, then what we understand that there are huge involvement, okay, in terms of urban development scenario projects, but not inclusive. It's a selective developments. Okay, you can understand there are different spatial priorities. Okay, and most of the priorities going to infrastructure assets. Okay, where huge investment can be possible for business opportunities. Okay, and somehow you can you can feel that's a kind of real estate catalyst, okay, playing role into your urbanizations or maybe urban development or maybe infrastructural encroachments. Then you can see transit oriented development, even with multiple places. As I mentioned, there are climate adaptation plan for Jakarta. There are thoughts that capital should be changed to Nusantara. Okay, so there are huge infrastructural investment and real estate appreciations, and you do not know in background what kind of real estate appreciation some of the lobby makers making for themselves and making their profit in terms of urban development scenario. Okay, so can we say it's not selective development? Okay, here you can see the budget. It's real 460 to 523 trillion. Yeah. Even 80% investment came from private sector, already confirmed. Okay, remaining 20% may be public, maybe ODA, maybe some other fundings. So mostly on infrastructures, and those infrastructure investment and their continuous business will be reforming your city plan or maybe lobby with your city plans. Okay, so then we heard about high value corridors, okay, infrastructure plans. Sometimes it's actually giving a lot of spatial routing strategy, then again real estate appreciations, and then we are not even thinking about vulnerability solutions, but thinking waterfront redevelopments. Okay, not development, redevelopments. Okay, that's also very highly valued investments. Okay, so those everything PPT actually cutting it. All of Marxist geographer Harvey. There is one theory called spatial fix. Okay, how that kind of real estate appreciations, somebody taking profit, but your city development plans getting in different way of plans and procedures. But still, those high value investment, we do not know how much impacting our cities developments. Okay, so anyway, I just giving you food for thoughts with political economical debate. But all of you do continue reading even spatial fix more. You can understand how land appreciation, forced migration, and social inequality actually fixing spatial dimensions. Yeah. And how capitalism, attempting different kind of economic crisis and, restructuring your geographical dimensions and shaping your city development, context. Okay. So let us move some more context. And although we are talking about political economy, there are very popular book by Jennifer Robinson. So that book probably I provided. Maybe you can read it. Okay, how modernity and development actually, um, you know, questioning us to move into contested cities. Okay, so do anybody have any idea or any kind of terminology about ordinary cities? Have you heard about that term? It's a very valuable, concept. Okay, and very inclusive kind of terminology. Have you heard about any time? Okay, so let me give you idea that ordinary cities actually, making more inclusive and equally important and theoretical valuable for all the cities, regardless of without any labels. Okay, maybe global level, maybe your national, all the cities. There should not be any such kind of ranks. Okay, all cities are, there are some debate. As per Robinson's argument, all cities are actually, similar if we are not competing with each other. Okay, and somehow what I discussed in earlier slides, if you remember, those kind of aid, partnerships, finances, actually, involving your city, disordinary. All cities are ordinary, but due to those involvement, your city is going, disordinary, and landscape actually, urban development landscape actually changing with power relations, global connections, and also local practices. Okay, sometimes, our stakeholders not getting into depth, and somehow, global connections and lobby actually making our cities in, different kind of dimensions. Okay, so we have to understand to not to be cities as a contested. Cities should be ordinary in terms of our localizations, in terms of our local practices. Okay, and in terms of thinking about, definitely city evolutions not similar in all the cities. Okay, so how rationally we can think about our city context, innovations, modernity, urban change, then we can think about, how inclusive planning should be. Okay, so I hope all of you can read to that interesting book. And let me move to main context, that how that ordinary cities concept we are not following, and we are promoting actually unequal urban futures. Okay, so definitely we know that urban modernity available in all the cities, even not only western metropolitans, even somehow ordinary city actually supporting how global south, or maybe Southeast Asian cities are not even lagging versions of northern cities. Your city is local, your cities have unique characteristics, your cities is ordinary, but do not think about that kind of local issues to be globally contested to make your city contested cities. Okay. So anyway, we are actually moving into ordinary cities concept to contested cities. Okay, whenever we feel that our city's development, little lagging, we can do that development, we can do that development in terms of climate adaptation. There are huge investment plans into, in your city investments. Okay, that actually checking and changing your dimensions of city development. So means now we are moving some of the contested cities. That this is general example in southern South Asian cities. Then we are influencing with some of the modernizations and development scenarios. We are questioning our elite powers, political peoples. We have to do those development, and during electoral behaviors, somehow investments happening. After investments, you can see a lot of engagements. Then you can see your city. Okay, so Sifa, can you identify that city?
I think this is still Jakarta by the landscape.
Okay, great. So every time going to you. So finally, we are talking about Jakarta, 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 but people thinking about changing even capital, and those kind of skylines, non-inclusive informal settlements, still in questions, no solutions. But then we are changing our capitals and thinking about to climate adaptation solutions. Okay, let me move to some other example. That kind of thoughts actually giving us cities in world class cities, developing cities, that rank should not be there in ordinary cities. Okay, your cities is unique characteristics but do not be contested with, and which can shape your different dimensions of city development and plans. Okay, so here you can understand how global capital and informality coexisting, different urban political economical dimensions. Okay, and then we are actually making contested city, and our urbanism, not focusing on local context, then urbanism going challenges, and then western dominance, and then we are following western theory, western planning, but which is not really locally applicable for our cities. Okay, so then multiple modernities also shaping your city futures, and regional, diversified context also getting overlooked or out of planning context. Okay, and then in terms of those modernity, there are a lot of power, finance, structure, and engagements which actually making more unequal development of our cities. Okay, okay, let me move to another concept, contested city. Have you heard about that contested city, anyone?
No.
Okay, all right. Contested city is nothing. What we said that aid finance is actually making more competitions with cities. Means if we compete with global funders, global donors, and global cities development, then who is powerful, that power will be capturing our local traditions and local uniqueness, and which will definitely be a kind of lot of different movements, then transnational institutions, then overlooking informal communities, then different kind of stakeholder shape will be negotiated, and also conflictual. Even sometime we can see our city will not be neutral development, and that will be following into different contested and competitions of developments. Okay, so definitely, that's a simple story how those continuous negotiations through finance, governance, and those kind of development initiatives, how changing our everyday urban life and making cities uniqueness without considering informal communities and social movements, that actually not giving our unique development of our cities. Okay, so all of you can read. There are two Alisa Walter, mostly on modern Baghdad related citizen advocacy and survival stories, and then another one, General the Contested City by Malenkov. Maybe all of you can read. I'll try soft copy, not provided yet. Maybe I can provide that soft copy too. Okay, then uh, let me check time as well. We are entering now contested city. In contested city, we are now competing each other by numbers, governance, dashboard, early warning system, how much you are investing in infrastructure, how much you are successful in your urban futures. Those kind of terminology and context actually shaping our urban governance, from simple dimensions to going into different complex social inequality dimensions. Okay, then still informal settlement and economies also, there are a lot of questions. Okay, statistically even you cannot find even appropriate data. And then some of the ranking, although intensifying competitions, but we are not thinking how financial redistributions will be. Okay. And then somehow we feel performance matrix is also reshaping, but how, still after reshaping, we are not understanding how administrator will be acting into those kind of numbers. Okay, how those financial distribution will be. Okay, so that everything, from those framework actually making into change. And then let me give you some of the political social theory context, how structural exclusions also are happening, during those kind of involvements. You know, in many urban development planning, we are still using colonial zoning framework. Okay. But our contemporary planning system is totally different. Context is different. Population is very high compared to earlier, situations, but still we are following those framework. Although we have a lot of master planning model, we are thinking about to make more inclusive, but still we are marginalizing, informal urban growth. And you can read that paper by Vanessa Watson. You can understand how we are sweeping pores in terms of urban planning in 21st century urbanization. Okay. And although we are trying to target achieving net zero cities, but still, we are going through huge urban poor, poverty, and inequality conditions. And, in terms of those investments, planning, infrastructure, financial involvement, it's actually sweeping urban poor away from proper planning dimensions. Okay. And somehow, housing plan, we are thinking housing plan, but you can find some of the housing plan not even affordable for low income residents. Okay, then why you are making, how we are making inclusive? And also you can find out there are a lot of, enforcement through nature based solutions where socio-spatial segregation is happening. Okay, means land value increasing, poor people cannot access those lands. Okay, means we are making segregations of rich communities in some of the urban, that urban planning actually reinforcing again socio-spatial segregations. Okay. And then, although we have a lot of models from global cities, that planning model, all of you heard about Chandigarh, very successful, but still, how that kind of planning will be fit with our local urban realities. Okay. That again giving you, questions, how ordinary cities can be inclusive than the contested cities. Okay. I hope those kind of terminology will not be giving you more tough sense. Okay. So next, how it's changing different structural competitions. Okay. In terms of, housing constructions, although we are thinking adoptions, but still, lot of market inclusion and rationality, getting in questions. Okay. In some of the development scenario and also construction, somehow economies, sustainable economics coming in questions. Even, as I mentioned in first slide, in terms of Jakarta, that reclaimed land plan, how urban livelihoods also overset it. Okay. A lot of questions still, not even in solutions. And then somehow in those development, huge investment, we are following rigid regulatory and zoning frameworks. That's even not inclusive somehow. You can find out taxes, fees, entry fees, multiple things even coming into those infrastructure plans and investments. Okay. But then you can find out that contrasting picture. I think that kind of, phases will be again in questions that how those inclusive plan can be structural solutions. Okay. Okay. So finally, we can see that rights and how justice can be into resilience. Yeah. So in terms of climate predictions, we are thinking high development, high investments, high value economic zones. But in terms of climate protection, still not even inclusive. There are a lot of developmental plan in coastal area, even in Vietnam. We have seen, multiple donors, multiple investments from different countries. Okay, different business plans, but those relocations plans still, a kind of risk reduction narratives, not even solutions. Okay, and then there are huge financial involvement which actually helping real estate or redevelopment interest, but not actually going to inclusive planning into urban developments. Okay. Then still livelihood protection adaptation planning in questions. Then socio-spatial inequalities still increasing by social segregations, or maybe nature-based solution implementation and segregations. Okay, I generally give some training to students. If you are thinking about business, you can think about problematic land in urban area, and then you can provide nature-based solution. You can sell it more than 10 times. Okay, so that kind of business actually, happening with those global finances. Okay. And then some of the engineering solutions also there, but not much such a kind of equal thoughts and dominating in terms of social considerations. Okay, so finally, if you read that paper by Gina, you can find out how that justice and that kind of exclusion making more resilience to our cities. Maybe we can say that's as a selective resilience. Yeah. And then, okay, all right, we understand all the debate. I'll be giving much time for discussion and debate other than monotonous of my lecture. Let me conclude what we understand. Okay, so climate governance definitely, including it's a voluntary corporate initiatives by development bank programs, municipal networks, and it's a those authoritative or initiations actually you can say multiscalar. Okay, and we even understand there are in ASEAN even Southeast Asian city context, how those cities directly engaging with global networks. Just one example I was given that for Jakarta, that first plan, how Dutch expertise, ADB finance, and then how shaping different governance dimensions in terms of implementations with avoiding appropriate justice and also overlooking inclusions of local livelihoods. Okay. And then there are a lot of hybrid governance increasing capacity building, but still there is a very huge fragments in terms of accountability. Okay. Somehow those kind of planning and dimensions in identification of project, identification of implementations, area selections, there is no citizens right. Citizens cannot vote those development back, even some initiatives, how making lobby and continuing those projects. And then PPP contracts, often it's an arbitrary clause. Okay. Even that's going outside of national courts. You do not know that what will be implementations with different kind of safeguard policies. Although there are safeguard policies in strong and very well, but still there are huge questions in terms of those safeguard policies. Even that's going totally out of clause of national courts. Okay. Let me move out. And then also we can see there are urban future actually negotiating across different scales, different authorities, and which actually, shaping your urban futures. Okay. So it's almost 43 minutes of lecture. I can be again revisited with all the concept, idea, city approaches. So there are multiple terminologies like ordinary city, contested city, then inclusive cities. Okay, so I hope all of you digest all those terminologies. Okay, so let us have our more discussion around 15 minutes into that lecture.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ma. It's very informative. In our first session, we have kind of more into the people that talking about the sex worker in the city, and now we are moving towards into the parties, into the government, into the city. It's more like into the urban. So this is like a very good combination between the previous lecture and your lecture also. It's very good and informative. As you see, there are around 2 people already want to ask you, so we can start from Hanif.
Okay, so I'll be expecting everyone should have at least one questions. Otherwise, I'll be asking one questions to everyone before
Okay, so we can start from
Deepak,
Hanif.
can I just bring in one connection? which Ratoola and Malay both said that the people who are marginalized are poor people in both setup. So I just wanted to flag that.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Professor Paula. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Paula. So,
So maybe we can start from Hanif. Hanif, can you turn on the camera and start question? Start your
Thank you very
questions.
much. Am I audible?
yes,
Yes.
it's clearly audible.
First of all, I would like to grant His Excellency and gratitude for Dr. Malay Pramanik for an excellent presentations, and also thank you for mentioning a lot about my country and the idea of Great Seawall in Jakarta. And I hope we can discuss further about these topics because I actually live in Bekasi, near from the Jakarta, and also my mom live near from the sites for the Great Wall of the Sea. So for the Great Wall of the Sea, actually there are many objections to talk about it because if it really implement very well, that it can cause many things. It can
Yes.
harm many things. For example, like the ecosystems and also the people who live around it. And it also reminds me when I was visited the sub district in North Jakarta, such as Marunda, Cilincing, and also Tipar. It's the part of North Jakarta that really near from the coastal areas. And as you mentioned in the presentations, there are many of disparities happens around it. And I also want to mention about, so in North Jakarta, actually it's located in the West Jakarta, but near from the coastal area, there are actually a huge real estate developers called Pantai Indah Kapuk. So Pantai Indah Kapuk is a real estate developer that are they created a place for a very rich people that can live and interact in that area. But the consequence of that developing, they actually erase. Yeah, they actually sorry to say, they kick the locals so
Yes.
that they can buy
Lot
the
of
land.
relocations,
Yeah, a lot of
but huge segregations with rich elite class,
yeah.
and then huge again financial involvement, but still not any particular solutions for those who are here. Infrastructure
Yeah,
definitely will not be sustainable.
yeah, and
That's
also
already evidence. That's nothing. Only game of financial
yeah,
engagements.
and
Okay.
also, doctor, I want to hear your opinions. What do you think about the marginal people that get erased because of the development in the city? And also, can the development in the city equal for all the residents, regardless of the status? Like you mentioned earlier about an ordinary city. You said that ordinary city should be mentioned equally and also
Yes.
important. And can it implement for the residents inside of the development of the city? Thank you very much. Sorry for
Okay,
my
that's a
long
great
question.
question.
Yeah, sorry for
I would definitely love to respond it. From my recent project, even Professor Paula also a co-partner of that project. We have a great consultant from IMI, and he is actually advisor of ACI. Okay, and he always remind me, Dr. Malay, whatever project recommendation should be, it should not be high investment solutions. Okay, so then definitely we had that kind of approach that some of the local adaptations, how local people following those adaptation, if you can prioritize them, if you can value them, and if you make those adaptations from success stories to national level implementation strategy, definitely that's possible. Okay, and so those kind of strategy even emerging. I think you heard from recent COP, there were discussion on indigenous strategies, local adaptations, how those kind of adaptation will be more inclusive into policy. I think that can be a better solutions for ordinary cities. Hanif, I hope it's clear now.
Thank you for
Okay, because we can't clash with nature other than what we learned for long time and how we are continuously adapting them. Other than that solution, hard infrastructure will be totally failure of solutions. Okay.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Okay, thank you, Hanif. Shahriar. Okay, I can see
Thank
you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pramanik, for introducing terms like inclusive city, then ordinary city, then also contested cities, as well as climate governance and hybrid governance. I was not familiar with these terms before. So, I mean, I feel that ordinary cities is rather utopian in nature. So when you think of an increasingly capitalized world, why should we consider ordinary cities over contested cities?
Yeah.
So that's my question.
Okay, that's a great question. Definitely, in some context, that's also we have to think about local conditions, and definitely we have to move into that kind of actions. But still, if we are incapable to thought about inclusive, then why we'll be moving into making its contesting city? Okay. So what's happening? That's actually I can give you example. Those governance dimensions actually changing due to lobbies. Okay, and due to minimal understanding how that kind of shape will be impact in our cities. Okay, so that shape we have to understand, and somehow we can see there are flood protection. You can see whenever investment will be coming, there are some research funding from or, those kind of organizations. Oh, if we not manage flood, there will be huge billions of loss. Okay, but why then we are not evaluating? If we manage locally, local adapted, then what kind of loss will be? If we again giving chance to engage them into those local finances and model governance, then what will be impact for long? Okay, what even Hanif mentioned about that infrastructure investment, definitely there are huge impact. So local actors should understand that what kind of impact will be, other than any kind of back lobby or maybe benefits. Okay, so I can't give you direct answer. I hope you understand how policymakers getting influenced with back. Okay, and then how that kind of lobby getting into different dimensions of urban planning failures. Okay, and definitely we have to do research science. In any cases, if we see academics policy in developed country, developed city very well connected, but somehow we are failure to be appropriately connected with our academics into development or planning a contest. Okay, so I think that should be integrated with proper research understanding. We can invest what our city future will be.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Malay, so there is one comment from Dr. Ratoola, and there are two questions. One is from Aung and one is from me. And I will start from the comment from Dr. Ratoola. She say that large-scale infrastructure projects such as metro rail projects are being funded and politically greenly, even though the financial return seems to be low, as very few can afford it, and cost overruns are super high, leave alone ecological or social concerns. This remains paradox. Elected representatives at the city level have very little power and are bypassed by this hybrid governance structure. I couldn't agree more of what Dr. Ratoola Kundu also saying. And there is one question from Aung. He is asking, dear professor, does inclusive city mean city for the people, a city by the people? To be an inclusive city, should this city necessarily be ordinary city? And I have one more question from myself. Actually, this is actually like Professor Paula triggered me to ask the question, and then it also comes from what Professor Paula wants to ask. So it's kind of a combination between me and her. So we both want to ask if the city experience the gender. So maybe you can start one by one. Yeah, we still have some time. Thank you.
Okay, can you repeat again your last questions? If the city experienced with?
Is
Gender.
the city experiences gendered? Do women, men, other genders experience the city differently?
Okay, that's a great question, Professor Paula. And support with Ong. Ong, I can see your questions also. Okay, I think that's definitely yes. If we are planning for inclusive city, definitely people, all the people have to be concerns equally, and also maybe we can say how we can continue with their voices, and then how that voices will be more appropriately into proper planning and implementations. And then I hope, Ong, you got my answer. Definitely by the people, for the people,
Yes,
and
Professor.
also, okay, for the people, by the people, and with the people.
Yes,
Okay,
Professor.
with the people missing, so maybe you can include it.
Yes, Professor.
Okay. And then can I continue one questions? Then what we can do? We can follow ordinary city or contested city if we follow inclusiveness. Ong.
Yes, Professor.
So
Um,
then what will be? Ordinary or contested?
I think we should follow the ordinary, Professor.
Okay, that's all right. So all of you
Yes.
read. Maybe later on we can continue even more discussion.
Yes, Professor.
Okay, Professor Paula, definitely, as I mentioned, if we are thinking inclusive, then definitely gender dimensions into be equal voices and into appropriate policy concerns, not only in terms of pen and paper, and definitely all voices, if we consider, then that will be a good right for more sustainable and more tangible outcome. Okay. Okay. Any other questions from
Thank you,
anyone?
Molloy.
Okay, so all of you understand now what is
You're
ordinary
already
city?
getting hearts. People are sending heart emojis, so that's wonderful.
Okay, all right.
Oh, we
So
have
there are
one
questions
more.
from Ishita.
Yeah.
How does climate-induced migration shape our cities um, as ordinary sites of adaptation while intensifying contention over land, housing, and urban belonging? Uh, Okay, all right. So that's definitely, there are a lot of research and synthesis. Relocations, other than in emergency situations, definitely should not be promoted. And we should try how their livelihood and all other basic amenities will be more inclusive into their places. That example we have seen even in Cambodia. There are one community in Preveng. Those community there were actually mangrove was not very successful that time. Then lot of real estate developers, corporates came, and with political lobby, those people with getting some of the reimbursements, with influencing, that was supposed to huge development area, and maybe infrastructure project, or maybe what we can say, reclaimed reclaimed land planning. But then what happened with some of the people's initiative, those lands now very inclusive, those people now can stay. Earlier it was that kind of questions that people will not be adapting, people will not be inclusive into that area, that will be making more vulnerable for them. But then what happened, I see those community more wealthy than any elite class. Okay, and that people now with nature-based solutions, they are doing fisheries. This is called community fisheries. They are following proper nature-based solutions. They are earning their livelihood and continuing their life more than 10 years. Okay, I hope, Ishita, you got my answer. Definitely, although there are those kind of issues, but still with some solutions, with good kind of understanding, good governance, that definitely can be possible. And also people awareness also a big kind of component into. Okay, then another questions. Gender concerns are entering planning, policy making in transport planning, for instance, but many battles to fight. Yeah, that's true. We actually fail to appropriately in everything in transformations not be possible with very immediate time. I think that's need time. We now moving to equal importance, equal voices. So we actually lacked into early from long undevelopments. So definitely that's need time, and then by that time maybe if people are aware, if people are understanding appropriately, then those voices will be more appropriately taken into planning and considerations. So not very easy, even that I immediately understand from my aunts who is now even political positions, but her approach, attitude and everything, then I understand that's needed some time. At the immediate implementation should not be a transformative, should be into step by step or with sustainable way. Okay, I hope Ratoola, I tried to respond it.
Dr. Ratoola Kundu is teaching in TIS right now. So
Thank you,
Oh, okay.
Malay. That was very
she
interesting.
was our previous speaker.
Hi, Dr. Ratoola. Nice to talk you. And I see during your Q&A session also you were responding to Sarihar.
Right. So it was.
I was actually JTS DS earlier, 1 year to 3 months I was there.
Yes, I know that. Yes. So good to connect. And I really enjoyed your presentation. But I think
Um,
there's so much to unpack while we keep talking about this, and I
yeah.
feel that the main perhaps issue is our elected representatives at least at the urban level are not equipped, are not powerful
Mhm.
enough to
Mhm.
push back against some of these larger forces, and that's kind of and they're constantly being
That's true.
marginalized
That's
and
true.
bypassed by various other
Yes.
setups, whether it's the smart city special purpose vehicle
Mhm.
or those kinds of hybrid mechanisms that go
Mhm.
just above their heads. So, and as
Mhm.
true representatives, political representatives of people, if you're not
Mhm.
able to bring those
Yes. Yes.
concerns to the debate
Yes.
and discussion.
Not in such kind of realistic understanding. Even somehow I can understand from my project. We had some of the direct stakeholder from department or ministry. So
Mhm.
somehow Siemens not possible to do those kind of thing. Then Siemens and I do not know those community that they are still living into those kind of vulnerability. Okay, you see, so that's kind of answer actually for all the administrators.
Yes, and
And
I think possibility of collectivization is
mm,
also kind of the fact that you're socially and spatially also getting fragmented
mm,
because of these
mm,
projects, and it's
mm,
harder to bring and collectivize people, get them
mm,
on the same page or platform, and so resistance becomes, I feel, more localized, and it
mm.
doesn't move beyond a certain scale and level, and that also
Yes.
you will have small wins perhaps, but the larger
Mm.
things are already taken away from you because those
Yes.
decisions are
Yes.
happening
Yes.
way above
Yes.
your level. So
Yeah, that's actually needed little larger scale enforcement, like how national policy also can integrate those voices. I can remember even some of the Indian funder even looking into those kind of indigenous local adaptations, how that kind of thing can be into national policy implications. When I was at TIS, I actually proposed one proposal immediately that's got accepted. That's actually was on widow policy, how they will be resilient during sea level rise and other issues.
correct.
So I think yeah, they are looking into. And then that's true even in urban planning governance, we actually not valued architects. I even talked yesterday, day before yesterday, that India, there is no such kind of terminology how architect can play role. There are huge architect organizations. You can see there are very good city, even very good parks, very good roads, then public parks. Still, we do not have that kind of engagements with architects. Okay, I think still there should be some kind of position. They can better design in terms of nature-based solutions. How inclusive should be. Okay,
Dr. Malay,
so.
actually, if I kindly request a bit extension of the time because Actually,
That's all
we
right.
have
That's all right. We can continue that discussions.
maybe just one last question from Emilio because I think he kind of have a very good question. So he's asking, how does vulnerability to extreme climate events create resignation and hesitancy among peer communities to invest in more safe infrastructure? How does this resignation and vulnerability influence place attachment and resistance to displacement, and how lack of investment in more safe housing because of risk is used to justify their eviction? So
Okay, so yeah, definitely. I think that's directly I can respond from my project. That's actually similar in vulnerability to sea level rise. That actually creating a lot of eviction resettlement questions. But then what happened? There were building codes and setback rules in Thailand. So if you are locating in zone 4 codes, and then definitely you have to move or you have to hide your house after certain meter of elevations, because in some month they are getting flooded and maybe ground floor will be totally flooded. So other than those restrictions, so then based on other than any evictions or displacement, government actually supporting how they will be adjusted within that places. So definitely they are more aware and they are now living even high standard community. We even try to visit those places and see how those community adapting themselves, but it was very restricted. But from outside we actually observed that they are actually living with waters without any flood issues, without any resettlement, without any kind of vulnerability concerns, and those are very elite class even locating in sea. Okay. So there are some understanding long-term sea level, water level, then they build housing height as per that water level, and maybe probably for 20 years they will be more sustainability and resilient within that particular area. Okay. I hope Emilio, you
Yeah,
got
thank you.
your
Thank
answer.
you for the answer.
I think I had a follow-up question to this is how do we therefore understand risk? Because if the rich are simply saying that for us it's short term, it doesn't really matter. We will stay there for 20 years and it's fine. But in the process, you are sending out a wrong message or a signal that that the conditions don't matter. It's not worth
Yes.
actually. Uh,
Yes, and what actually Emilio mentioned, that sense of place. Even we see there are multiple communities, and they are young people actually not even relocating. Although during flooding time they are getting flooded. Sifa, if you can remember our visit, some of the other provinces. So then the person actually replying that his mom actually very attached with that place, although they are getting vulnerable and under risk, but still they are trying to adapt based on their long term understanding how should be adapted during flooding time. Then they mention we are adapting, and maybe during high water time or maybe high tidal time we are actually going to upper floor, and all item, there are no item in ground floor, maybe 1 or 2 day, then going out water, then their normal life again they are continuing. And that sense of place or sense of attachment with their places, with their grandparents or maybe parents actually giving them huge adaptation strength.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was in that project also before. It's so related with what the lecture that you have given today. So it's like it's not nostalgic, but it's bringing me back to the moment, and then it's so related on this lecture today. So thank you so much, Dr. Malay and Dr. Ratoola, for coming and for giving us the lectures. Very insightful and very informative. And thank you so much also for the participants. So if I may, maybe can I share your email, Dr. Malay? Maybe some participants would
Yes,
like.
yes, please. And also PPT I'll be sharing you. Maybe you can share with everyone. And also
Okay.
I'm trying to download that contested city book. I was having little trouble from Genesis library. Maybe I'll be
Okay.
trying to find out and sharing that book too.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Malay. Thank you so much. Okay, I will just disseminate to the participants. So thank you for coming. So we will have another session again next week with a different speaker. So thank you for coming and see you in other time.